Welcome to Real Stories MKE, presented as part of X-Fabulous mission to connect Milwaukee through real stories. I'm Joel Dresang.
And I am Kim Shine, and X-Fabula believes that everyone has personal stories worth sharing. X-Fabula nurtures storytelling through workshops where folks can build their skills and their confidence. And they also host slams where people can share true stories on stage. That's where these stories are coming from. And today we are bringing you 4 of them.
Yes, this season of Real Stories MKE is presented by Christine Simchich and Jim McNulty, and the theme for this episode, Kim, is respect.
Let's cue Aretha Franklin.
R-E-S-P-E-C-T, find out what it means to me. R-E-S-P-E-C-T, take out T-C-B.
Respect is a fundamental human right. It's something we need to allow for ourselves and to show to one another. It's meeting people where they are and giving them the benefit of the doubt. A lot of times we hear about respect only when it is lacking, and people struggle with that. But then, when they share their stories, we can learn. Our first story of respect comes from Hope Liu at a 2019 X-Fabulous Story Slam with the theme Untold Stories of Resistance. Hope shared how other people's assumptions about who she is resulted in how she was treated. Here's Hope.
It turns out I've been suffering from an identity crisis like my whole life, but I never really knew it until now. See, in 1994, I had achieved what my parents had been dreaming for me since before I was born, which was to go to college, finish in 4 years, and then continue on to graduate school. I had been accepted to the University of Notre Dame's world-famous vector biology lab. Not only that, but they were going to pay me to do it. I got a full ride, tuition waiver, and graduate assistantship. So, I know, thank you, yes. So I packed up my stuff and I went to Notre Dame. And I have to say, it was a little overawing. They have that big gold dome and touchdown Jesus. And I knew I wasn't in Charleston, West Virginia anymore, where I had grown up. See, in Charleston, we have a gold dome, but that's because it's the state capital. So anyway, I was getting ready to go to Gen Bio Teaching Assistants orientation, and I knew I looked the part because the part that you played at graduate school was jeans, t-shirt, low maintenance hair, no makeup, hiking boots, and tennis shoes, which was solidly great for me. So we go into the lab orientation session and we're waiting for the coordinator to show up. And she walks into the room and we're like, yay, we're gonna get started. And she looks very comfortable, kind of like a mom, you know, she's kind of soft looking. Could see her bustling around her house on the weekends. And she tells us what we're gonna do and how we're gonna do it. But then she gets to the important thing, which is the schedule. We just really wanna know, like, when do we have to do this teaching thing? So she starts handing out the schedule, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, well, this is kind of strange. Everyone else got to teach 3 sections, and I only got to teach 2 sections. I started to panic because I could hear my dad's voice in my head going, what did you fail to do? Why didn't you work harder to prevent this from happening? See, in my house, we didn't have problems that couldn't be solved if you just worked a little harder, which is probably why growing up in the 80s, I killed a can of Aquanet almost every day, trying to get this hair to do that big thing, curling iron, hair teasers. But my hair, like my dad, didn't get the memo that some things couldn't be solved by hard work. Back to Notre Dame. I'm panicking. I know I'm going to have to talk to this lady, so I go up to her after everything is done, and I'm like, I'm really sorry. I just couldn't help but notice everyone else got 3 sections to teach, and I only got 2, and I'm concerned that my tuition isn't going to be paid or something's going to go wrong. And she looked up over her shoulder at me, and she goes, oh, you're Hope, right? And I'm like, yeah, I'm Hope. She goes down the roster, looks across, she goes, oh, right. See, I saw your middle name. I just assumed you couldn't speak English. And I was like, wait, what? My middle name is Chinese. It's Guat Phi, which makes perfect sense because, hey, my dad's Chinese. And my first name is Hope, which also makes perfect sense because I grew up in Charleston, West Virginia, and my mom hated the name Helen. So I was a little puzzled by this, but she went on to explain in case I didn't get it. See, we get a lot of Chinese graduate students coming over, and they adopt an English name but keep their Chinese name. So when I saw your name, I just assumed, but it turns out you speak English better than me. Than I thought. So, she was, don't worry about it. Just teach the 2 sections. Next semester, you'll teach the 3 sections. We'll just call it a wash, and you'll be done. And I'm like, okay, I guess so. So I'm walking back to the lab with my friend, and she goes, wow, you're so lucky. And I thought, I don't feel lucky. I feel like I just failed. See, I had wanted her to check the box that said normal graduate student assigned 3 sections. And she checked the box Chinese. But you know what? She got it right. Because my whole life, I have been asked all of these things. Are you Mexican? Are you Spanish, Polynesian, Filipino, Hawaiian, Native American, Korean, Japanese, Indian, and my personal favorite, Eskimo? So as I look back on this kind of bizarre identity crisis, I have 3 feelings about it. 1, I feel really angry. I'm angry that people feel the need to put me in the box that makes them think they understand who I am. And I'm sad because they don't know me and they're not seeing me. And I'm relieved because it turns out that identity crisis isn't my problem at all. It's yours.
That was Hope Liu from a 2019 Exfabulous Story Slam at the Jewish Museum, Milwaukee. And we actually have an update from her.
Ooh.
She says, I'm still trying to remember that no one can be defined by one aspect of themselves that I might see or know. It's surprisingly hard in this politically charged, hypermedia world to remember and act accordingly. It's so much easier to categorize and dismiss people. I'm still learning about other people's life experiences and am humbled at how much more I need to learn. However, some things haven't changed because, as I said in my story, I still believe that if I work harder at it, I can be better at it.
Not bad. Well, respect isn't just something that we give to and get from others. It's something we need to find for ourselves. And that's what Andy Anderson shows us in their story, shared at a 2025 Slam with the theme Found Family. Here's Andy.
When I was a senior in high school, I came out as bi, and that was a very important part of my life. And coming into college, that was a very big thing, as I wanted to be myself, and I wanted to show that I could be as somebody who's going to be an education major, and that was very important to me. So I also decided that I was going to choose a roommate that I knew, right? Somebody I went to high school with, somebody that I was friends with. So as we're becoming roommates and kind of getting to know each other a little bit better, even though we'd kind of been friends in high school, you know, we're watching movies. Every weekend we'd watch rom-coms together, and it was this very exciting bonding thing that we did. And there was one weekend where I was like, hey, can we watch this TV show? It's called Feel Good. It's about this queer romance. I really want to watch it. And she was like, oh, sure, I guess. And I was kind of like, okay. We've just watched all of these movies showing heteronormativity, which is great, but I wanted to really embrace this. And she just kind of shoved it off. And I was like, okay, well, we'll watch it. And she was on her phone the whole time. And I enjoyed it, and I was excited to see it and see this romance. But we didn't really connect as much as we had been on the other shows and movies that we'd been watching. And so as we continued to be roommates, we'd be talking, and I would say, oh my gosh, like, Elizabeth Olsen is so pretty, isn't she? For those of you who don't know, that's Scarlet Witch in the MCU. And I was like, God, she's so pretty. And my roommate was like, why do you have to make everything so gay? And I was like, because that's a part of me. Because I like everybody. People are attractive who are attractive, okay? And it kind of stung. And as we continued to be roommates, she said, hey, I'm gonna go live with this other person next year. And originally I was kind of hurt and like, oh, we're not gonna be roommates again. And as the year went on, I went, maybe that's okay. Maybe I'm gonna go off and kind of figure myself out. And so I decided to be an RA, you know, get to know more people and meet others. And so as January rolled around, I decided to put in my application, and I was accepted as an RA, and that was awesome. And also in January, I was kind of like, I don't know that this title of being a woman feels correct to me. And so as that month kind of went on, school started back up again. January 20th, I come back to school, and we're doing introductions. I'm in an education class, multicultural education, and they say, hey, introduce yourself, name and pronouns. And I say, hi, I use she, her pronouns. And I felt myself shatter in that moment. That is not true. And I couldn't take it back. I felt like it was already out there, and I couldn't do anything. So for the next 6 months, I tried to decide, what does that mean to me that she, her doesn't fit? And as I decide, I'm starting to just meet the people that I'm going to be an RA with the next year. And as I come into our meeting in April, and I say, hi, my name is Andy, I use she, they pronouns. And they were just said, okay, that sounds great. And I was like, oh, okay. That's awesome. So I continue on through the summer. I start going by Andy, which I hadn't before. I started working at a new job, and nobody else knew me other than a few people that my name was Andy. And I worked with kids, and it was great. And then the rest of the year, I was an RA. And that first semester, I said, hi, I'm Andy. I use they, she pronouns. And that still didn't feel right. That still wasn't correct. And as I talked with my friends who are RAs, I got to meet more queer people, more people of different backgrounds, and it was awesome. It was amazing meeting more people. And as I slowly got to see those different perspectives and see those different people, I said, hi, I'm Andy. I use they, them pronouns. And I felt accepted. And I felt those people who really cared and who corrected others and who made it true to me that that was a true statement. And that's where I am now. Thank you.
Well, that was Andy Anderson, and we do have an update. Andy says, first of all, I want to thank my dad's best friend, Mark, who is an Exfabula veteran, for encouraging me to tell a story at this Story Slam. I wasn't sure whether I was going to tell a story that night, but so glad I did. After I was done, so many people came up to me and told me how touched they were by my story. Many said they knew people who went through a similar experience. I never thought that I would get such a positive response or that so many people would connect with it.
That's great. Kim, do you want to do some ultra shorts?
I always love doing ultra shorts.
Yes.
Because if you go to a slam and you don't want to get on the stage, you can just write a little short story on a paper and the host will read it.
Because everybody has stories to tell.
Exactly.
Yes. Do you have one?
I do.
Okay.
This one is from someone who says they're working in Mequon. That is the name that they gave.
Okay.
They say, I'm really tired of being at the bottom of the totem pole with people constantly overlooking, disrespecting, and outright lying to and on me. The way I'm treated is outrageous. I keep my attitude in check because I'm black. If I let it show, y'all gonna be pissed.
Big sigh. Here's an ultra short from Anonymous. Even if you don't support me and my life choices, at least respect me and my pronouns. At least listen to me when I yell my real name. Even if you want to ignore me. Even if you don't want to hear me.
This year is from Kayla. After graduating college, I committed a year of service and completed my service with City Year, an educational nonprofit that seeks to provide support to underperforming schools. Equipped with my knowledge of history, context, oppression, and systemic racism, I thought I would effortlessly transfer this information to my 7th graders. But I was wrong. I would go on to discover that giving them love, consistency, and respect would go further than history lessons on racism and oppression.
Kim, I have another ultra short. This one is, again, from Anonymous. It says, there was this dude at my soccer camp who wasn't respecting me. He told me that God made only 2 genders and that I'm going to hell. He told me liking girls was gross. I tried my hardest to ignore him, but then he started making fun of me for wearing my mask. I told him my father was immunocompromised, and he laughed. He body shamed my friend, so we started to bring an adult into this. But of course, the adult took this guy's side. It was impacting my time at this camp, but soon I realized he wasn't worth it. So I ignored him. And hopefully, in the future, I won't let the haters get to me.
I hope so too, because, you stop giving it attention, eventually it'll just find something else to do.
Our third respect story comes from Marshall Hemphill. Marshall learned about respect as a child amid the brutality of civil rights actions in the South, and his lessons have continued as an adult in Milwaukee. Here's Marshall.
I'm originally from West Helena, Arkansas. I'm a child of the 50s and 60s. In 1964, I was 10 years old. There was a lot going on in the country at that time. A lot of civil rights marches, demonstrations, riots, all over the country. And West Helena was no exception. It was a time when my mother decided that she would introduce me and my twin brother to the world that we was growing up in. She took us to a civil rights march. Going to that march, we encountered her sister, Aunt B, who was against her taking us to the march because of the danger. But she took us anyway, and we made it to the point where the march was started, and that was the first time I saw that many people at one time and in the same place. So shortly after the march got started, about 10 minutes into the march, a police officer walked up behind my mother and took his baton and just stabbed her in the back with it. She fell to the ground and she jumped up and frantically looking for me and my brother, and she grabbed out our hands and continued to march. About 10 minutes later, the same police officer walked up behind her again. Again, he stabbed her with his baton, and she fell. She jumped up and grabbed us and continued to march. Eventually, we made it to the end of the march with a lot of people crying, some was hugging and comforting each other, and some was celebrating. But being stabbed in the back like that, you think that would have been the worst part of her day, but it wasn't. She had to take me and my brother home and try her best to convince us that all white people weren't bad people. And for me, luckily, I got it, As time went on, I continued to grow up. I continued to identify things that just wasn't fair. And one morning I woke up and I learned a new word, integration. And all hell broke loose. There was a lot of violence going on. There was a lot of uncomfortable stuff going on. But as I grew older, I got married, left West Helena, and came to Milwaukee. 40 years later, I did all the things that I was supposed to do. I got married, got a job, bought a home, raised my kids. I didn't depend on anyone else for anything. One day, one of my cousins called me and invited me to her house to play dominoes. I had nothing to do, so I drove by her apartment complex and parked and sat and waited for her. While waiting, the police pulled up. They approached my car from each side. And the one police officer asked me a bunch of questions, wanted my ID, wanted to know where I worked. All I was, my address, the whole works. But one question in particular that he was interested in, have you ever been to jail? Don't know, I've never been to jail. Have you never been to jail for anything? So never. And 30 minutes into this, he's still running checks on me. He constantly come back to the car and ask me the same question. You never been to jail? No, I've never been to jail. So eventually he had me my license back and they drove off. But they didn't go far. I noticed that they drove about a block, turned around and parked, waiting see if I was gonna start my car and pull off. Well, I sat there and my cousin came home and I greeted her at her car. And we went upstairs and talked for a while. And I explained to her, this guy couldn't believe a black man my age never been to jail. I looked out the window to see if they were still parked there. They had moved. And at that point in time, I felt as if that baton was still in my back. Thank you.
That was Marshall Hemphill, who shared his story at a 2017 Ex-Fabulous Story Slam on racial justice. Kim, I have another ultra short. This one is, again, from Anonymous. The day after the election, my 4-year-old son became obsessed with the Statue of Liberty. We don't know how it started, but it was intense. We bought him a costume, complete with torch and crown and robe. He wears it everywhere, to school, to his sister's music class, to parties, and most recently, to see Santa. This must have been a few months ago. People's reactions have been interesting. Some people think it's patriotic. Some think it's cute. Santa rolled his eyes and said, "Someone sent the tax man." We're just glad he has so much admiration for strong women holding torches.
Now that is true respect. I'm here for it. Where'd you come from, my friend, my little 4-year-old friend? Our final story comes from Susanna Bartlow, who reminds us that respect isn't just about individuals. It extends to the belief and work of others. Here's Susanna from an Ex-Fabulous Story Slam back in 2021.
So when I got the phone call, you know, when you get that feeling, you know right away that there's something different about this phone call, even if it's the same one that you've had 20 times before. It was on a Sunday night, and I had had conversations with my boss on a weekend before. I was the director of a gender and sexuality resource center at a Catholic school. So we talked on the weekends before. We'd had some issues. But I could tell there was just something different about this phone call. I could tell it more in the tone of his voice. And he asked me a couple questions. He said to me, first of all, whose idea was it to choose Assata Shakur? Now, Assata Shakur is a very well-known Black activist from the 60s and 70s. She was falsely convicted of shooting a New Jersey state trooper. She's been living in exile in Cuba, and she's become kind of an icon for the Black Lives Matter movement. She also was someone that the students at my resource center had chosen as the subject of a mural that they wanted to do for community outreach. And we had a community artist who was working at the center who made a design, both of Assata Shakur and of Audre Lorde, and they chose between those two figures. And so when he asked me that question, there were a couple things inside that question. One of them was it you or was it someone else? And the other question was, why in the hell would you choose Assata Shakur? And so my answer to the question had to be very careful, where I said, well, I approved it. I approved the choice. I think it's a good choice, and it's what the students wanted. And the other question he asked me was, is it a problem? Would it be, is there any reason that we should not paint over the mural? And of course, there were a lot of reasons running through my mind, but again, when you hear in someone's voice that there's only one possible answer to that question. And so if I was thinking between, in my director head on a Sunday night, I was like, well, if it's either the center where we can keep doing ongoing work or the mural, then I'm going to say, if that's what has to happen, that's what has to happen. So that was the conversation that I had with him on Sunday night. Now, I get in on Monday morning, and for the first time, and I can't tell you how long, I was there at 8:30. And so I get in on Monday morning, but as I'm walking down 15th Street, I see the community artist who's the program assistant, who really did such a spectacular job with this project. And the students really did lead the experience, and we had all these beautiful conversations with one another, and the mural had been up for about 6 weeks when I had this phone call. So when I was walking in on 15th Street, I saw the artist leaving, and we had the kind of relationship. We had had this really beautiful collective management experience all year long, and the mural was in a lot of ways a culmination of the connection and the power that we had shared together. And as she was leaving, she looked like I had never seen her look before. She was looking down. She was very emotional. And she was on the other side of the street. And although, every time we walk in, we say, "Oh, good morning. Hi, how are you?" We had that kind of connection. But this time I was like, she needs to walk. She needs to go. She's got to get out of here. And I knew why. Because she had walked into the office that we shared and seen a completely blank wall. So when I walked up and I saw the blank wall, I stood there, I took a picture of the blank white wall. The whole thing had been whitewashed. And then I, sat down, and my boss called me a little bit after that, and we had another almost identical conversation. He asked me the same questions. I had a face-to-face meeting with him and someone from HR a couple hours later. I had a super productive day because I was like, if this is going to happen, I'm going to leave it just in order. And then I got called in about 4 o'clock that afternoon, and I got fired. So one of the quotes on the mural was, "No one is going to give you the education you need to overthrow them. No one is going to teach you your true history, teach you your true heroes. If they know that knowledge will help set you free."
That was Susanna Bartlow, and she says, "My biggest related update is that I now live in Minneapolis and am working on speculative fiction about white women's role in history. I manage community outreach for a Cancer Clinical Trials Network, and I co-facilitate Finding Freedom, a workshop for white women taking on white supremacy."
Kim, that's all the time we have for this episode of Real Stories MKE, but Exfabula has many more stories to share. It has been hosting Story Slams since 2009, and everybody can find some of those stories at exfabula.org.
That is right, and more stories are on their way. We have one more this season. Ooh, I'm so excited for it. The Exfabula website lists upcoming storytelling workshops and slams so that you can join in on the storytelling and we can do more episodes of Real Stories. You can also connect with Exfab on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. And you can subscribe to Real Stories MKE wherever you get your podcasts.
Thanks to everyone who makes Real Stories MKE possible, including the storytellers, Exfabula staff, Exfabula members, our producer Jordan Terry, and audio engineer Sam Woods. Also, a special shout out to 89.7 WUWM,
Milwaukee's NPR,
an Exfabula season sponsor and an empowering partner for this show.
That is very true. We do appreciate your support. For Real Stories MKE, I'm Kim Shine.
And I respect that. I'm Joel Dree saying, remember, everybody has stories worth sharing. Think of telling yours.